Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing my Rolex Datejust 41, reference 126300. I purchased this watch from MR Luxury Watches on chrono24.com for €10,000, including UPS shipping. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the other items one gets with the piece. Now firstly, I want to personally thank Michael Rux, the owner of MR Luxury Watches, for his outstanding customer service. He made the purchase of this piece an absolute pleasure, and I recommend you check out MR Luxury Watches on chrono24.com. So the watch comes in a cardboard outer watch box, which is protected by this white cardboard outer sleeve one removes. This is the outer watch box embossed with the Rolex coronet, so one removes the lid, pulls down the flap. Nice attention to detail because we've got the Rolex coronet embossed in gold, and we also have Rolex. So the box is protected by this foam panel, and I'll show you the watch box itself. Now I'm going to be critical of this watch box. Yes, it is well executed, it's finished to a very high standard, and the gold embossed coronet is very aesthetically pleasing, but I dislike this PVC vinyl plastic they use to coat the wooden watch box. It's got a grain finish to replicate leather, but the reality is it's not genuine leather, it's PVC vinyl plastic, and I think it's abhorrent. I think it cheapens the look of the watch box, and this is a high tier piece costing €10,000. One would expect a better quality watch box. I think they should use a solid wooden watch box which is high lacquered finish, or alternatively use a wooden watch box which is coated in genuine leather rather than PVC vinyl plastic. The interior is finished to a high standard, fully upholstered with a magnolia velour fabric, as you can see, and the watch sits in the base on a padded pillow cushion, as one would expect, also upholstered to a high standard in a velour fabric. One also gets this tag with the watch, and as you can see, on one side it has the hologram and superlative certified, which denotes that the movement used, which is the Rolex caliber 3235 automatic, is certified by Rolex as a superlative chronometer to -2 to +2 seconds per day. And on the other side we have Rolex SA Geneva and the coronet embossed. There's a flap in the lid, one pulls down, and that houses two items which I'll show you. One gets this leather wallet which contains the guarantee manual worldwide service booklet. It details all the authorised dealers in the Rolex global network, and on the reverse we have the electronic warranty card. So this electronic warranty card is scanned by the authorised dealer at the point of sale, and that activates the 5-year international warranty. We have the reference number of the piece, 126300, and also the date of purchase, 9th of October 2022. So this is a brand new unworn piece. And lastly, one also gets this booklet, which is the Oyster Perpetual Datejust Owner's Instruction Manual. Clear, concise diagrams. The instructions are in English, and it details the operation of the movement used, which is the Rolex caliber 3235 automatic. So, with regards to the specifications of the piece, this is the Rolex Datejust 41, reference 126300. We have a 41mm case diameter. We have a 47.4mm lug-to-lug measurement, a thickness of 11.5mm, and a lug width of 21mm. The Oyster bracelet tapers from 21mm at the lugs down to 15.4mm at the clasp. As you can see, the clasp is finished to perfection, flawless mirror polishing to the centre section, 904L oyster seal, beautiful lustre to the brush satin finishing to the outer section, and that contrasts with the flawless mirror polishing to the flanks. No sharp edges, no sharp corners, as one would expect. This is perfection personified. However, looking at this subjectively, I would prefer the Oyster Perpetual 41 clasp. I've previously owned the Oyster Perpetual 41. One detail I liked about it versus this Datejust 41 is the coronet on the Oyster Perpetual is engraved rather than being embossed. And that's actually more practical, because the problem with having an embossed coronet is it sits proud of the clasp, and therefore it scuffs and scratches on desktops. With an engraved coronet, as per the Oyster Perpetual, the engraving means that it's recessed, and therefore it doesn't scuff or scratch desktops, and therefore it doesn't catch. So I think this is not as good as the Oyster Perpetual 41. They could still mirror polish the centre section, but an engraved coronet would be more practical than an embossed coronet. I'll show you the interior. Solid 904L oyster steel, milled clasp as you can see, engraved to perfection, flawless mirror polishing to the top side, underside and flanks, and it is very aesthetically pleasing. Now, one negative to the Datejust 41 is there is no glide lock clasp as you can see. I think the clasp could be lengthened. I would like to see them introduced using the glide lock because it is a superior mechanism than using the EasyLink extension, which provides 5mm of on-the-fly adjustment, and as you can see, I have deployed the EasyLink extension. Now, it does snap into the body with a nice positive click, and it also deploys with a nice positive click, and it is good to have 5mm of on-the-fly adjustment. In addition to the EasyLink, it also has 3 dimples either side on the interior, so one can move the end of the bracelet in or out by 3 micro positions, but it's not as good as a glide lock used on the Submariner and the Submariner Dates. And the other problem with using this shorter clasp versus the glide lock is that the bracelet clasp never sits symmetrically, as you can see. We have an odd number of links. We have 7 links on one side and 5 links on the other, rather than having 6 and 6, which would make the clasp sit symmetrically. Now, the interior of the clasp, as you can see, is longer, but the exterior is shorter. So I think that they should lengthen the clasp and they should have 6 links either side rather than 5 and 7. Now, I've actually ordered 2 additional oyster links from my Rolex authorised dealer because I have an 8-inch wrist and this is a tight fit with 5 and 7. I personally prefer to have 6 and 8, and that means that the clasp sits more symmetrically underneath the head of the piece. With regards to the rest of the specification, we have a flat sapphire crystal. Now, the negative of the flat sapphire crystal, and this may come as a surprise to you, there is no AR coating on the underside. Yes, it does have AR coating on the underside of the Cyclops magnifier, but it's a curiosity of the Datejust 41. Rolex do not use AR coating, and when I tilt the piece at an oblique angle, you can see there is a lot of glare and highly reflective nature to the flat sapphire crystal. Now, on the current Submariner and also the current Oyster Perpetual 41, which I've both owned and previously reviewed, they do have AR coating. So it's strange that Rolex do not use AR coating on the Datejust 41, but on the Submariner and the Oyster Perpetual 41, they do have AR coating, both on the sapphire crystal and also the Cyclops magnifier. So very shiny and reflective, and this really would benefit from clear AR coating on the underside. The white gold applied indices are flawless mirror polished to a silver finish, and that complements the flawless mirror polishing to the white gold hands, which are also mirror polished to perfection. The needlepoint second hand is well proportioned and extends all the way to the black minute ticks on the chapter ring, so I like the symmetry of the dial. I actually prefer the symmetry of this dial versus the Oyster Perpetual 41, which has double applied indices at 9, 6 and 3. I like the single applied indices on the Datejust style. I think the symmetry is better. The black text on the dial contrasts very well with a matte white dial, and I prefer this matte white dial versus the sunburst dials used on other Datejusts. I think the legibility is better, and it's good that it's not a glossy enamel dial because that would make it more shiny and reflective with the absence of the AR coating on the underside. The flat sapphire crystal is very well executed, and I like the bevel which projects above the top edge of the bezel. As you can see, it catches the light, so it's an absolutely gorgeous Cyclops magnifier applied to the flat sapphire crystal. The bezel is solid 904L oyster steel, the mirror polishing is outstanding, and I actually prefer the flat profile to the Datejust 41 bezel versus the domed profile to the curved bezel on the Oyster Perpetual 41. I think the flat bezel looks better than the domed bezel used on the Oyster Perpetual. The flanks are polished to a flawless standard, as is the tops of the lugs. Personally, I prefer if the bracelet was brushed satin finish in the centre links, but the mirror polishing does complement the mirror polishing to the flanks, and there are no sharp edges, no burrs to the flanks, so it does add interest to the Oyster bracelet. Beautiful lustre to the brushed satin finishing to the 904L oyster steel, and the mirror polishing is absolutely perfection personified, so gorgeously finished, but I just think it would look better if it was brushed satin finished throughout. I'll show you the case back. Solid 904L oyster steel, bubble back profile to it. I prefer a flatter case back. Longitudinal brushed satin finishing to the centre, midsection is flawless mirror polished, and then the circumference is brushed satin finished because it's CNC lathe tool machined, coin edge finish to it. I think a flat case back would be more comfortable, but having said that, as this is perfectly sterile, It does feel very smooth and comfortable against the wrist, although it is boring to look at. I think Rolex should engrave the coronet or alternatively specification and reference number on the case back to add interest, but it's a characteristic of Rolex case backs, they are sterile. The male end links are a good tight fit to the head of the piece, and the undercut to the flanks is very good, no sharp edges and no sharp points to the tips of the lugs. Right, so with regards to the crown, it's coin edge finished, mirror polished domed cap and an embossed coronet with the line underneath which denotes it's a twin lock crown. The trip lock crowns have 3 dots underneath the coronet as per the Submariner and Submariner date. So let's test the screw down crown execution. Absolutely silky smooth. This is sublime screw down crown execution. I regard Rolex twin lock and trip lock crowns to be the industry standard. Nothing comes close to a Rolex screw down crown. It's just perfection personified. Perfect interface between the internal thread of the stainless steel crown and the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. The 904 oyster steel is very well machined. The threads are silky smooth. So in the first position, one can manually wind the caliber 3235 automatic to top it up to its maximum 70-hour power reserve. It feels very smooth to manually wind. One can feel the tension in the mainspring gradually building up. Pulling it out to the first click position is the quick set date complication. Rotating the crown clockwise advances the quick set complication. Nice heavy indexing to the caliber 3235. I like the positive clicking each day of the month, clicks over with a good solid click, so it's an absolute pleasure to set the date. Pulling it out to the second click position is the time setting position, and that hacks the movement. No backplay clockwise and anti-clockwise. There's an immediate response from the crown. When one rotates it clockwise and anti-clockwise, the minute hand immediately moves. Nice tight feeling to the caliber 3235. It feels tighter in terms of the gearing's resistance than its predecessor, the caliber 3135. The 3235 is a chronology, and one can feel that the gearing more. So now there is a curiosity to it, and this is something I dislike about the 3235. With the predecessor, the caliber 3135, when one rotated the crown clockwise, it made the minute hand rotate clockwise, which is the convention as one would expect. It's a curiosity of the chronology movements, the 3235, that when one rotates the crown clockwise, it actually makes the hands rotate anti-clockwise, the opposite direction to one intuitively would think. Now rotating anti-clockwise makes the hands rotate clockwise, so that does take some getting used to. The hands rotate in the opposite direction to the direction one would expect. Rotating it clockwise makes it go backwards rather than forwards. I dislike this. I actually prefer the 3135 crown rotating in the same direction as the hands. But however, this is subjective. For the majority of collectors, this isn't going to be negative. Pushing it back in, it's got a nice positive click, and that restarts the movement. The needlepoint white gold second hand begins to sweep around the dial once again. So let's test screwing it back down. Immediate thread pickup, this is 10 out of 10. Sublime screw down crown execution. So the screw down crown provides an effective hermetic seal to 100 meters of water resistance, which is perfectly acceptable for a daily wear piece. Just absolutely sublime. It's a real pleasure to operate the twin lock crown. It's exactly as smooth as a trip lock crown used on the Submariner and Submariner dates, and I really like it. Right, so I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now, as I've detailed, this is a tight fit with all the links in the oyster bracelet, so in order to get it across my hand I have to remove my glove. But on a positive note, with the Easy Link extension deployed, I can just close the clasp. Now, as I've detailed, the main negative to Rolex bracelets, and I'll apply this to this Datejust 41 and all their models, is they always put an odd number of links. We've got 5 links on one side and 7 links on the other side, and as you can see, the clasp doesn't sit centrally on my wrist, it sits off-centered. Of course, it's closer to the 5-link side than it is on the 7-link side, and of course it's shorter than a glide lock. So this piece would be better if it had a longer clasp as per the glide lock, and if they had 6 links on one side and 6 links on the other, versus the odd number, 5 on one side, 7 on the other. But I'm going to correct this by putting an additional link on this side and this side to give it a looser fit, but also to move the clasp 1 link to the right. Now, with regards to the fit is very good. Feel good factor is good, comfort level is good, proportions are excellent. 41mm head of the piece is balanced very well by the 21 to 15.4mm taper. I would prefer 20 to 16, which is the industry standard. On a 41mm head of the piece, I think 20 to 16 would look more aesthetically pleasing. However, 21 to 15.4 is acceptable. The lug to lug is very good, it's 47.4. Now, as you'll know from my previous reviews, the perfect lug to lug measurement is 48mm, regardless of whether you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist or a 7 to 8 inch wrist respectively. At 47.4 it is 0.6mm shorter than perfection, but it's close enough to 48 to be satisfactory. Nice curved undercut to the case, as you can see. The fit and comfort level could be enhanced if they used female pivoted end links versus using male end links, because as you can see, the end link in the bracelet is rather long. The centre section being mirror polished does catch the light. A female pivoted end link would pull the end link in the Oyster bracelet closer to the wrist and give a better fit, so there is room for improvement on the fit. 137 grams with all the links in the Oyster bracelet, and it does feel very well balanced. 41mm head is very well balanced by the 21 to 15.4mm taper, and I think the proportions are excellent, and I also like the look of it better than the Oyster Perpetual 41 with a domed bezel, because this bezel is flat, and I think they've made the correct decision by using a flat bezel rather than using a domed bezel. Now, I've previously reviewed the 126334, which is the Jubilee bracelet version with the fluted bezel, and purist Rolex collectors would argue that a Datejust should always have a fluted bezel and Jubilee bracelet. But having tried both pieces, I actually prefer the smooth bezel and Oyster bracelet with mirror polished centre links versus the fluted bezel and Jubilee bracelet of the 126334, which I previously reviewed. I think this is a more understated piece. I dislike the fluted bezel and the Jubilee bracelet on the 126334 because I think it's too shiny. With this, although it does have a mirror polished top edge to the lugs, the flanks, and also the bezel and the centre links, I actually prefer the more subdued look of the smooth bezel and the Oyster bracelet versus the more reflective look of the fluted bezel and Jubilee bracelet. So really it's subjective, but having reviewed both, I think the flat bezel and the smooth bezel and the Oyster bracelet is better looking than the fluted bezel and Jubilee. So just a shame it doesn't have AR casing, as you can see, very shiny, very reflective, although I do really like the white dial and the white gold applied indices and white gold hands, which are silver mirror polished. Comfortable piece to wear. 137 grams is very well balanced, although of course the comfort will be enhanced when I add 2 additional links when I get those from the Rolex authorised dealer. Right, so just bear with me and I'll put my glove back on and then we'll do a lume test. So this uses Rolex chrome lights, as one would expect. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to its absolute maximum, and we'll see how the lume performs when it's charged up to the absolute peak. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, the chrome lights has not disappointed. This is something I like about the symmetry of the Datejust dial versus the Oyster Perpetual 41, which has double applied indices at 9, 6 and 3. I actually prefer the single indices on the dial on the Datejust 41. The baton hands are very well proportioned. I'm just going to move the minute hand because it's currently beneath the Cyclops magnifier, so I'll move it so you can see it better. So as you can see, one can clearly differentiate between the baton minute hand and the baton hour hand. They're different lengths and they're well proportioned. And I like the proportions of the applied indices, which are white, gold and infilled with chrome lights. Now this is clearly 5 to 6 layers of chrome lights. In terms of brightness, I regard chrome light to be equal in quality to Swiss BGW9 Super Lume Nova. The blue tone of it is very aesthetically pleasing, but this is subjective. Personally, I prefer the green tone of C3 Super Lume Nova versus BGW9 and also Rolex Chrome Lights. Chrome Lights has a very similar blue tone to BGW9, but I actually preferred Rolex watches when they used Super Lume Nova because it used to glow in green versus when they changed to Chrome Lights, which glows in blue as per BGW9. So I think this would look more aesthetically pleasing if it had a green lume like C3 Super Lume Nova versus using blue chrome lights, but however, for the majority of collectors they actually like the blue tone of chrome lights because it does look like BGW9. Glowing very brightly, will continue to glow for a good length of time. It's 10 out of 10 performance as one would expect. Right, so let's discuss the movement used because it's one of my favourite aspects of the piece. So this uses the Rolex Caliber 3235 automatic, which is a chronology movement. It has 31 joules. It runs at 28,800 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 4 Hz. 70-hour power reserve is very impressive. Hand winding and hacking are useful complications. And it has a quick set date complication, which I've demonstrated, which works very well. So certified as a superlative chronometer to -2 to +2 seconds per day, which is outstanding. This one is running consistently at +1 second per day, which is well within the -2 to +2. +1 is very good. 70-hour power reserve is also very good. It's a bidirectional winding movement, so it's efficient. It uses the Parachrome blue hairspring, which is anti-magnetic, which is another positive. And it has a chronology escapement, which improves the efficiency versus its predecessor, the Caliber 3135. So the chronology escapement is very low friction and also more efficient, and that is a real benefit of the Caliber 3235, which succeeds the 3135. It uses Paraflex shock absorbers, so the movement is shock resistant. Now, it's not the perfect movement. The Caliber 3235 does have a noisy rotor because it uses ceramic ball bearings in the rotor. The Caliber 3135 did not use ceramic ball bearings in the rotor, and therefore it was quieter. Now, to put it into perspective, it's not as noisy as a Miyota 8215, which is known for having a noisy rotor. But one can hear the rotor when it's winding bidirectionally, clockwise and anti-clockwise on this 3235. It is audible. With the Caliber 3135, its predecessor, one couldn't hear the rotor winding clockwise and anti-clockwise, and that's a negative of the chronology movement, such as the 3235. The ceramic ball bearings in the rotor are more noisy. But it is efficient. 70 hours is an improvement. The 3135 had 48 hours of power reserve, so 70 hours is a notable upgrade. The other negative, which I've demonstrated, is the curiosity that when one rotates the crown, the chronology movement, such as the 3235, the hands move in the opposite direction to the crown. I would prefer if they'd synchronized it as per the 3135, so rotating the crown would rotate the hands clockwise. I dislike the fact that the hands move in the opposite direction to the crown, but that is just a characteristic of the chronology movement, such as the 3235. So it's a reliable movement, it's accurate, the build quality is excellent, the quality control, the finishing and the materials are all outstanding. The efficiency of the chronology escapement is technically excellent, and I like that it has a 70-hour power reserve, plus 1 second per day is outstanding. So really the only negatives are the hands moving in the opposite direction to the crown and also the ceramic ball bearings making the rotor noisy. Other than that, it is an outstanding movement and it's reason alone to purchase the piece. So lastly, I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch should meet 2 criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So I paid 10,000 euro for this piece, including UPS shipping from MR Luxury Watches. Yes, I consider it to be excellent quality, but it's poor value at 10,000 euro. The true price point of this piece really is 2,000 euro. It's a 2,000 euro piece retailed on the grey market for 10,000 euro, because the reality is these are incredibly difficult to purchase from Rolex authorised dealers at their retail price. There are negatives to it, such as the lack of AR coating, which is wholly unacceptable for a high-tier piece costing 10,000 euro. It should have AR coating as per the Submariner and the Oyster Perpetual 41, and it could be further enhanced if it had a glide lock clasp, because the EasyLink extension isn't as good as a glide lock and the 3 micro adjustment holes aren't as good as a glide lock. So the Submariner and Submariner Dates using the glide lock have a better clasp. There is room for improvement on the clasp. Other than that, it is an excellent piece. So I would say excellent quality, but poor value, and I think there is room for improvement. It isn't the perfect Rolex, and of course, the movement, there is room for refinement with regards to the sound of the rotor, the ceramic ball bearings. If they were lubricated, or if they'd used steel ball bearings, it would have been more quiet, and that is the negative of using ceramic versus using steel ball bearings. They're not as quiet as steel ball bearings, which are lubricated. So it's an excellent piece overall, but poor value. I do like the watch very much, and of course that's the reason why I purchased it and decided to add it to my own personal collection. I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Rolex Datejust 41, reference 126300. Please feel free to post your comments below the video. Thank you very much.